So my name is Alex Fierce. I've been working on this project for over 2 years now. So this is, I think, relative OG status. I do a couple of, I'm sort of myself a decentralized entity. So I do a couple different things. I run a company called Murmuration Labs, which started with the question of what about what's in the files and what are the risks associated with the contents of the files that we're storing. And so that's a thing that I've been working on for over a decade now, really, like the worst stuff on the internet, which makes me a lot of fun at parties. And I also am a board advisor to Filecoin. I'm a lawyer, and I'm a legal advisor to Protocol Labs too. And so I've been thinking a bunch about the different types of risks that are entailed with what we're doing. And I have a couple of slides which may or may not show up, but I thought I'd offer some sort of broad points and also address some of the specific questions I've been getting, which Meg has generously raised very helpfully, and then spend most of the time on questions, really. So I guess to back up for a second, there's like the question is now emerging, and I'm going to talk about this from like the notary perspective and then also really the broader storage provider perspective, because we're all dealing with complying with the same laws and dealing with the same risks. So I guess a couple of things. I guess thing one is that compliance, when you're in the decentralized mood, is a little bit different, and it's one of the challenges that we have, because sort of in a conventional like lawyering or compliance situation, as those of you who've dealt with lawyers know, like part of the strategy is to offload risk. So if you have like a counterparty and you're making a contract, your lawyer is going to be like, let's take the risk and put it over there. And then their lawyer is going to be like, no, you take some. And then that's sort of how the dance goes for a while. And then if you can find some third party, such as like the environment or democracy or whatever, to put the like, that's great, let's externalize it to some third place. But when you're running a decentralized network, we're all sort of in it together, and we all sort of care about each other's fates. And so offloading risk to a counterparty or offloading risk to other parties in the network is not necessarily what you want to do, because you want everybody else to succeed also. But at the same time, you can't tell other people what to do, right? So we're in this situation where we have interlocking incentives, but we also want to put the risk where it belongs, but we also are not trying to like have everybody attempt to have a race to the bottom where everybody is screwing everyone else over, and then everybody winds up with a tragedy of the commons situation where we haven't complied or we've like put it on other people. Cool. So does that make sense? And this is like, I think at a like conceptual level, one of the hardest and most interesting things about running a decentralized project like this, which is like, how are we going to comply together? And I think File Plus is a good laboratory, I'm calling it, for doing this, because there's always at least two layers to this. There's like compliance, which is like, let's be legal, let's do what is required of us. And then there's a layer on top of that, which is like, let's be admirable. Like, let's do things which are positively incented. Let's do things that are going to perhaps do more than the minimum that's required of us, but do things that are going to create trust and create positive feedback loops and all those other things. And to me, File Plus is really about that part of it. And so I think File Plus and the notaries can help lead the way into figuring out what compliance will look like for the broader storage provider community, because we're really trying to be model actors and not like minimum viable, person who's like, cutting class as frequently as is permitted, but no more, no less. Cool. So one of the hard parts is like, there's a lot of different laws. It's not like when you start an internet company, whether it's like a storage company or an application or a social media company, you don't really get like a packet that's like, here's the laws, go for it. They are disparate, obviously, depending on what country you're sitting in. I looked up the 22 or so notaries, and they're all in different countries, of course. And so there are different jurisdictions which want different things from us. Meg pointed out that the Australian government increasingly wants more and more from us. Those of you who are dealing with Europe know that, because of this law, the GDPR, that anything that touches the precious data of European snowflakes must be protected and safeguarded with great care. So there's, and that is to say, even if you're located in the US or you're located in China, if you're dealing with the data of a European citizen or resident, you're still implicating that GDPR law. And so often, even though law is territorial by nature and it's sort of still stuck in the literal-minded 20th century of the nation state, it still traverses territorial boundaries, and your responsibilities can be multiple depending on what you're dealing with. So, but I thought I would sketch out at least the main areas that are of concern to us. And so the first one, and maybe the biggest one, is probably privacy and data. And this is a thing that was a long time coming, but it's not going to go away. When you're dealing with data, the questions of things like, do people have the right to delete their data? Do people have the right to modify their data? Are you transferring it in a manner that's acceptable? Who has which responsibilities? Those of you who dealt with the GDPR, this European law, know that there's like a framework, which is like, there's like a processor, and there's like a controller, and there's like a data subject. There's like different roles that you're playing, and then you have to decide who's who. And sometimes you'll fight over who's in what role, as part of this like skirmish over responsibility. And there's many other aspects of that, including sort of data localization laws sometimes, which say like, if you're dealing with the data of a particular set of citizens from a particular country, you should keep the data in that country and not send it overseas unless you've specifically done some other steps. So there's a lot of complexity there, right? Increasingly, since Ukraine and Russia, people have been noting that sanctions law is a thing. And so normally you get into the KYC, know your customer, anti-money laundering sort of questions around like financial institution questions. And KYC really sounds maybe onerous and scary, but it really is just like, who are you? I would say like the basic point is like, do I know who you are? And it's really for it's for the protection of multiple parties, because you want to know who people are so that you can protect them from fraud. But then you also want to make sure that you're not transacting with somebody who's on a sanctions list or transacting with somebody in a country that's on a sanctions list. So like I said, because of Russia and Ukraine, this has become more top of mind for people. And so this is another separate set of questions of like, how much should we be invested in the identities of who we're dealing with? What should we require from them? Those sorts of things. And then the final one is illegal content. And this is a thing that I could talk all day about on just this bullet, but I'll be brief, which is that whatever you probably think it is more complicated than that thing, although it might seem simple. And there's a bunch of complicated questions here, but maybe the most core one for us is you can really you can't do nothing, because there are certain types of things that are so illegal and so taboo that it would be disastrously illegal to have it on hand, stored, and also be pretty bad for the network to become known as a place that is a haven for this. And so the go-to example that everybody always has for this is what is called in the industry CSAM, which stands for child sexual abuse material, which is like sort of illegal and taboo everywhere. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants to host it. If you do host it, you want to get rid of it. And there's like a set of protocols around that. And then another category is what the kids are calling TVEC, terrorism or violent extremist content, which was initially sort of tended to be, sort of like ISIS beheading videos and things like that, and as now increasingly things like school shootings. And so this is the sort of stuff where it's like, it might put some of your anti-censorship or censorship-resistant views to question, which is like, do I want to be a storage provider for that, or do I want to be known for that? And so those things are uncontroversial in the sense that they are illegal and taboo virtually everywhere. But then at the other end of the spectrum, there's things where you may feel political pressure and about storing it, but they're not illegal. There's lots of things in this category that are so-called like lawful but awful. And increasingly, the storage layer of the stack, this is not a Web3 issue, but this is like an internet issue, is increasingly politicized. And so if you think about the way that the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world for 10 or 15 years now have been called upon to, take this thing down, it's bad, take this thing down, it's abuse, take this thing down, it's harassment, take this thing down, it's a pirate movie, et cetera. If you're looking the last 2 to 5 years, increasingly the GoDaddies and the Cloudflares and the registrars, the DNS layer, and the storage layer are being called upon to make interventions. And this can be politically, it could be, oh, you're hosting a directory of abortion providers. This group wants you to take that down. Or it could be on the other side, like, you're hosting, a directory of, Black Lives Matter headquarters. So there's all sorts of things where political pressure is increasingly coming towards the storage layer of the stack. And we can expect that from governments as well as activist groups and others. And you really have to have an answer for what to do about this stuff. So those are some of like the general risks. So the mood of it, like I was saying earlier, is you can't, in lawyering, we're old-fashioned folks, and you can't be what's called the lawyer for a situation, tempting as it may be. You can't you're not supposed to come into a situation and be like, I can help. You're supposed to have a client and then help them. And then the other people have their lawyers and they're supposed to help them. But this decentralized collaboration mood puts us in a strange footing there. But nevertheless, we still have to deal with that conventional aspect of legal ethics. And the reason this is tricky is because the foundation, and I've talked with Matt and Lauren about this, who are like the foundation's lawyers, and with me as Murmuration, like we want to help, but we don't want to tell you what to do. And right? So there's this complicated modality of like, we are here to help. We're here to provide tools. We're here to provide suggestions, and we want to go really as far as we can in helping because we want the whole thing to succeed. But then we will hit a point where, like we will tap, like any lawyer will tap out and say like, well, at the end of the day, not your lawyer. Sorry. So that can be like a sort of sad and obnoxious moment to be like, what? I thought we were in this together. And one of my former colleagues had a signature file that said if this were legal advice, it would include a bill. So we want to generally be helpful. So I think that's like really the nub of like what we're trying to accomplish in helping, but not being your lawyers. But nevertheless, we've been talking about like some general principles and some things we want to do to help. So I'll rush through those and then we can talk. And one of them is that we want to have opt-in compliance, right? So this is why I was saying, like, instead of mandating things whenever possible, sort of in the Web3 spirit and spirit of this project, we want to say, like, okay, here's how we think you can comply. We suggest you do this. We're not going to make you, but maybe we will make it transparent when you do. So if you are complying with X laws, maybe we have a badge, or maybe we have a listing in the directory, or in sort of like the deal software where it's like, okay, these are the gold star providers. Sort of this is why the notaries is such a great way to do this. We can say, like, these people are doing KYC up to this standard. And that way, great, and then we can figure out how to do that. Now, there's a point past which there's a danger of re-centralization, I think, and Danny and I have talked about this a bunch, which is everybody plays follow the leader, then you wind up with the same result as a centralized system, which is like everybody winds up copying everybody else, and then you don't have diversity. And maybe in some situations that's okay. So like with CSAM, nobody wants it, nobody should have it, great, let's not have it. And then in other areas, we want a diversity of approaches and outcomes, and we don't want to over-determine that with our suggestions. So as I said, we can provide templates and software tools. In fact, Murmuration Labs, if you go to our GitHub, we have what we were calling kits, which is like sample content policies. Like we're making sort of like what I think of as like your starter wardrobe. Like this is like your first content policy, your first privacy policy. This is like, you know, what it looks like if you buy it off the rack. And then you can have your lawyer customize it if you want, or you can have us help you customize it. Not customize it so much that it breaks the network, but customize it somewhat to your needs, depending on where you're located and stuff like that. We may get to a point where we go from these manual agreements to something that's more click-wrappy. I think that would be, you know, in the sense that we will create a bottleneck somewhere in the software, you know, either in the deal flow or somewhere else where you can click on the thing and then you can accept the terms, and then we can provide to the notaries and to the storage providers default, you know, option 1, 2, 3, sort of like the Chipotle model, and then you can pick whichever ones of those you want, insert it into your flow, and then sort of make it clear to your deal partners like which one of these that you're using. So that's sort of where I want to go with this. And like I said, you can sort of modify them, but then beyond a certain point, then it might create problems. So we have to figure out the sort of range of tolerance where we want people to be able to experiment with their own terms, but not in a way that's abusive to clients or in a way that like takes them out of harmony with the network. Okay, get the next slide.
We're about 10 minutes.
Okay, so I'll do this quick. Okay, so I tried to sketch out some of each of these substantive areas, but like with privacy, for example, we've been doing some thinking on this. Where we're going with this, and we'll make some like documents available for starters, is like under this sort of GDPR model, for example, we want the clients to be what's called like the controller, and then for notaries of storage providers to be the processor. Now, I don't know, you have to do that, but like we've been thinking about who plays which role and what makes the most sense. And Meg and I have talked about this a little bit. And so in areas like this, I think we're willing to go so far as to say, like, within this legal framework, we think what will work best for the network is this architecture. And then we can have a dialogue and a discussion on like, how does this play out for some of you? So like if you're located in some countries, it might be harder for you because of data localization laws, et cetera. If you happen to have a client, say from Brazil, then you have a problem because Brazil has its own set of laws, and now you need to figure out what to do to comply with Brazilian privacy laws as well as European privacy laws, et cetera. So that's sort of like all going to be the fun part. I can do the next slide. For KYC, and so this is another thing that we're sort of experimenting with, which is we can have the foundation provide some of these templates. We can have Memoration provide some of these templates. And then in some cases, we can make a software tool if it is useful. So I'm interested to know if people think it is useful. So like with KYC, one of the challenges is you generally need to get an identity document, right? So you need to get a passport or a driver's license or something. And so this is like the crazy glue problem of privacy law, which is like whenever you try to comply with privacy law, you wind up requesting more and more private data. And then you have like, great, now I have to store secure copies of people's passports. Now what? So in cases like that, we would want to provide something that is secure to do the work that is compliant. So this is like Galen's nodding from his prior work. This is a rookie mistake. You like get copies of everybody's passports, and then you're like, dope. Like I'm storing it in non-compliant storage. So I'm interested to know how much help people might want on this, and we can figure out whether Memoration is the ideal compliance partner there, or whether some new entity that does like compliance as a service maybe should come to exist. Memoration sort of came to exist to do just content risk as a service, right? Just what's in the files. And so we might be well positioned to help with these other compliance issues, but we might not be. So that's sort of TBD. Last slide. I thought I would plug what we do have though. So this is if you go to bitscreen.co, this is the first thing that we shipped, which is a deal filter. So to the extent that you have bad CIDs, like if you know that CIDs are bad, if you got a threatening letter, you can plug the CID into this filter, and then it will decline further deals, both storage and retrieval deals. And it'll allow you to look at other storage providers, like bad lists, and share them and copy them back and forth, so you can sort of adopt them. And the things that we're working on is one of them. I'll do the very short version, but there's like a database out there of known CSAM, and there's complicated security problems there because they don't want to just like give it out. But we are trying to make this hash database interoperate with the CID namespace so that for a notary or for a storage provider, you can run files, unencrypted files, against this hash database and say, cool, there's no CSAM there, maybe get a badge, maybe advertise that. And then similarly with this other platform, we're working with the terrorist content analytics platform. So,
yeah, I was just wanted to know, like, how do SPs use this tool today? Do they download it, or does it really use the API calls basically to verify the CID? Is that?
Yeah, so it's a free web app. So if you just go there, you can log in with a MetaMask wallet. We figured everybody would have one of those, and it's and then you can just use it. We also have the code up on GitHub, so if you want to run your own instance of it, you're also welcome to do that. But we're running it for free.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and could build more such things if it is useful to people, under the same sort of understanding that like we want to help, but beyond a certain point, we can't do all the compliance for you. But this will be sort of ongoing collaboration.